everybody, it's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Carthage Razed Again, Early Muslim Expansion Medieval Documentary by Kings and Generals. Now, if you haven't seen my reactions to the other episodes in this series, sorry about that, I suggest you check them out before checking this one out. And the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical, if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, it is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions which hopefully be answered in the comments. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to Kings and Generals, another amazing history channel. And sorry, I got a lozenge in my mouth. And cool, something's getting warm in here. Let's turn my fan on. So without further ado, let's get this up on screen and see what happens in this. Oh, captions. Oh god, that's loud.
In our previous video, the Second Fitna saw the Umayyad Caliphate struggle through years of bloody civil war, emerging shaken but
against
intact.
the Zubairites.
Today, the armies of the Caliphate return to the frontiers, clashing with the crumbling Byzantine Empire in Armenia and North Africa. In the latter, they would not find opposition just in the Roman remnant, as the rise of a new warrior queen among the Berbers posed a serious challenge to Hassan ibn al-Numan's conquering army in the Maghreb. And even as the Umayyads won victories on the battlefield and expanded ever further, the cohesion and unity of their empire continued to deteriorate on their eastern frontiers, planting the seeds of their eventual collapse. Better to plant a tree instead, eh? And you can do that while
feel free to check them out if you're interested.
Go to established time. Following Ibn al-Zubayr's death and the surrender of his forces at the end of an 8-month-long siege of Mecca, the immediate aftermath of the Second Fitna would see Caliph Abd al-Malik dispatch armies to suppress the Carthagite uprisings that had been such a thorn in his would-be usurper's side. The Carthagite army ruling Yemen and Central Arabia had already begun to fragment and dissolve even before the Umayyad victory in the civil war, with their leader, Naji ibn Amir al-Hanafi, having been executed by his own disillusioned forces over his supposed secret negotiations with the Umayyads. Many of the Carthagites dispersed before the Umayyad reconquest, making for Persia or North Africa. With that said, the Carthagite remainder, led by Abu Fudayk, put up staunch resistance to General Umar ibn Ubaydallah's Iraqi army when they met in battle in Bahrain, driving back the Basrams making up the Umayyad left wing and seriously wounding Umar. However, they were held at bay by the Kufan right wing and the Syrian cavalry making up the center, then driven back to their camp when the Basrans rallied and returned to the fray. With the wind at the Umayyads' backs, the Carthagite camp was set alight, with the smoke and heat panicking horses and reducing the Carthagite defense to chaos. With Abu Fudayk slain on the battlefield, those of his followers that remained fled to the fortress of al-Mashaqqa, but with no relief or reinforcement coming, the walls of the ancient fortress did little more than entrap them. Lacking supplies, surrender came swiftly, and little mercy was shown, the mass executions of most of Abu Fudayk's followers ending the brief period of Carthagite dominance in Arabia in a grisly fashion. Though Carthagites still held sway in parts of Persia,
the Arab followers of Abu Fudayk were mostly spared while the Mawali were killed. Very different circumstances, but the crackdown on Mawali rebels during the Fitna was very harsh from both the Umayyads and the Zubayrids,
and would be behind further uprisings in the future. This would be their last major bid for power within the Caliphate. A more serious challenge to the reunified Umayyad realm would come in the north, with the breakdown of the peace treaty with Byzantium. Under Emperor
as the Caliphate was handicapped with internal conflicts in 688 Justinian II took this opportunity and offered a peace treaty with the shared revenue of Cyprus, which the Caliph agreed. This also gave him a chance to regain the lost territories in the Balkans from the Slavic tribes.
Justinian II's leadership, the Byzantines had...
True, it's easier to concentrate on one front instead of two fronts.
Had not been entirely uninvolved in the Caliphate's civil war, extorting tribute from the Umayyads and even taking control of Armenia from the Zubayrids. They also backed and supported uprisings of Christians within the divided caliphate. In the Nur Mountains, where Anatolia and the Levant meet, the Mardarite community had risen up along with thousands of escaped slaves in 688, launching raids into Syria and forcing the overextended Umayyads to make even greater concessions to quell a threat uncomfortably close to their seat of power. Though no major battles were fought, and it is unlikely this Byzantine involvement greatly impacted the civil war's course, Justinian II was able to secure a great deal of tribute, and, more importantly, the Mardarites themselves, who were relocated to regions of southern Anatolia left depopulated by Arab raiding to help rebuild the Byzantine power base. However, while the relocation of the Mardarites was a major economic boon for the flagging Byzantine Empire, it also removed an obstacle from the path of a renewed caliphate offensive after the civil war's end. Surprisingly, despite the favourable terms of the 689 treaty, it was Justinian that broke it and made the first move, attempting to regain full control of Cyprus and its revenues after decades of shared ownership. This action could be seen as a defensively minded preemptive strike, with Justinian expecting Abd al-Malik to break it as soon as his strength was replenished. Or Justinian may have simply underestimated the caliphate's strength, hoping to secure even greater concessions after a
That wouldn't surprise me if it was because he underestimated the strength of the caliphate.
Battlefield victory. Either way, the renewal of hostilities
Mind you, it's another example of corruption within an empire, or what's left of it.
quickly backfired for the Romans. Though precise dates are unclear, the later months of 692 saw two clashes take place. A smaller army of 4,000 invading Armenia under Uthman ibn al-Walid, and a push into Anatolia by the bulk of the remaining Umayyad armies under the Umayyad prince Muhammad ibn Marwan, a younger brother of the Caliph. Both generals achieved victory, thanks in part to the defection of thousands of recently conquered.
The Roman army was commanded by Leontius, who would soon depose Justinian II with his nose mutilated a year after the battle.
Macedonian Slavs Justinian had attempted to force into his army. These twin defeats undid years of Byzantine expansion and negotiation, leaving Armenia firmly under Arab control and Anatolia open to renewed Arab raiding in the following years. On the home front, Abd al-Malik worked aggressively to consolidate power in former rebel strongholds. A figure of central importance during this period was al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, who rose to prominence as the leader of the Caliph's personal forces and became famous.
Before his military service, al-Hajjaj was a teacher in Taif. Just like his father, he entered military service under the Umayyads during Yazid's reign, and then was promoted to Caliph's elite police force known as Shurta, similarly to the Roman Praetorian Guard.
For his keen military mind. Following the second fitna, he was rewarded with the governorship of Yemen and the Hejaz, a major display of Abd al-Malik's trust for the general, given the lingering anti-Umayyad sentiments in the former Zubayrid power base. Though only in the position 2 years, al-Hajjaj swiftly reasserted Umayyad control through harsh, unforgiving leadership and displays of force that both helped cow the rebellious nobility of the Hejaz and allowed Abd al-Malik to demonstrate his mercy through occasional more lenient interventions. Leaving Arabia behind in 694, he was sent next to Iraq.
Bashir ibn Marwan passed away from an illness and was buried in Basra in 694.
taking over as governor of Basra and Kufa from the Umayyad prince Bashir ibn Marwan, and working to reassert control over a fractured and rebellious Persia, where he would soon find himself on the front lines of another rebellion.
Just in case people watching this don't remember, that this basically used to be the territory of the Persian Sassanids, which are, at this point in history, completely gone. Especially after the murder of Yazdegerd III. Was it third or second? Probably second, but anyway.
Meanwhile, on the western frontiers, expansion was beginning anew. While the Caliphate had been the dominant power in North Africa for decades, the continuing Byzantine presence in Carthage left their hold over the region tenuous at best. Additionally, outside of fortified cities such as the aforementioned Carthage and Kairouan, the native Berbers held effective control of most of the Maghreb, with different groups entering into alliances with either the Caliphate or Byzantines based on shared religion or political expediency. So as long as the Byzantines represented an opposing power bloc, they could forge alliances with Berber kingdoms and tribes that had not yet converted to Islam, and back native opposition to the Caliphate's expansion. To finally
Just a quick side note, it might be slightly irrelevant to this, but if you've seen my reaction to, I'm not sure if it was Kings and Generals or History March talking about El Cid, that he was facing both the Moors and Berbers in Spain during the Reconquista. And someone said to me, and I'm not sure if I remember this right, that apparently both the Moors and the Berbers were pretty much the same. Because, like, I know this is years after what I'm reacting to, that when it all, like, converted to Islam and became, like, all Muslim forces, Berbers and Moors, and people said they're the same, but you best watch that reaction from the video I've done about El Cid, and then it might give you a better idea. But I'm sure they'll probably get to that further on down this series, but I thought I'd just mention that just in case.
Damp out this threat, Abd al-Malik dispatched Hassan ibn al-Numan with 40,000 Syrian, Egyptian and converted Berber soldiers in 694 to capture.
Oh, and I should have said this a lot earlier, but I apologise if I butcher any names.
Carthage. Initially, the invasion met
or the
only
pronunciation.
Success, with the city's fleet and garrison abandoning Carthage for Sicily before Hassan's arrival in early 695, and allowing the city to fall without resistance. Hassan had more enemies in North Africa than he knew, however. Following the death of King Caecilius, or Kusila, to the armies of Zubair ibn Qais, a new ruler had emerged to reunite the Berber kingdom Zuhayya had shattered. Known as Queen Dia to the Berbers, she was called Al-Kahina, the Oracle, by the Arabs, with rumours of her future sight a mark of her strategic prowess. As Dia united many Berber groups across religious lines in opposition to Hassan's advance, she entered into an alliance with Constantinople, cemented by her marriage to a Greek husband. Learning of Dia's prestige and determined to suppress Berber resistance, Hassan swiftly departed Carthage to march against her in Algeria, seemingly expecting another easy victory. Instead, when he engaged the large army Dia had raised near Bakaya, he saw the previous year's progress rapidly undone in a shocking military defeat. The precise details of the so-called Battle of Meskiana, named for the shallow river valley the two armies clashed in, are rather unclear, though it is known that even among converted Muslim Berbers, a sizable portion favoured Dia's cause, chafing at the inferior treatment non-Arab converts within the Caliphate's military received, just as the Persian converts of Iraq had during the Second Fitna. The defection of Berbers in Hassan's army, before or during the battle, could go some distance towards explaining the defeat of his larger and better armed force. Though whatever the cause of this disaster, the stung Hassan would abandon the campaign to await reinforcements in Tripolitania, not to challenge Dia for another 5 years. He did, however, clash once more with the Byzantines during his retreat, who, under General Absimar, had recaptured Carthage by sea in a surprise attack while Hassan had been marching against Dia. This time, Hassan took no chances. After years of Byzantine resistance and fleet activity out of the city, he chose to raze Carthage to the ground as Scipio Africanus.
The only difference was that Hassan did not pour salt after he razed the city to the ground.
The younger had centuries prior, conclusively ending the Byzantine foothold in the Maghreb and stripping Dia of a crucial ally. For his part, rather than continue the resistance in North Africa, Absimar commandeered the Carthage fleet for a voyage to Constantinople, where he overthrew Emperor Leontios and...
Ironically, Emperor Leontios' nose was also mutilated the same way he did to Justinian II. The way he did to Justinian II a few years prior.
Seized the throne as the new Emperor Tiberius III, compounding the internal strife and instability that had already weakened the Byzantine resistance over the past years. Accompanying these temporary setbacks in the west was a new...
In the same year, Al-Hajjaj sent an army led by Muhallab ibn Abi Sufra to pacify the Kharijites in southern Persia,
breakout of rebellion in
which
the
he seemed to do with relative
The
ease.
Hephthalite-descended Zunbil kingdom of Afghanistan was proving a formidable roadblock to Governor Al-Hajjaj's expansion attempts, and the first campaign against them in 698 ended in utter failure when Ubaydallah ibn Abi Bakr's army was lured into the heart of the mountainous kingdom, cut off from retreat, and destroyed. The greatest threat to Al-Hajjaj and the Umayyads would not come from the Zunbils, though, but from the general sent to lead the second invasion, Abd al-Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn al-Ashath. When he attacked the Zunbils in early 700, they fell back without battle, abandoning large swaths of their territory to the invaders. Fearing the same trap that had doomed Ubaydallah's army, al-Ashath opted not to push on into their mountainous heartland, planning to consolidate his conquests and continue cautiously expanding over the years to follow. But when Al-Hajjaj learned of this, he accused Abd al-Rahman of cowardice, demanding he complete the conquest of the Zunbils before he or any of his men would be allowed home to Iraq. Here, the harshness he had so often shown while subduing the Hijaz would backfire, as the soldiers in Abd al-Rahman's army, wary of the danger ahead and angered by their poor treatment, opted to follow Abd al-Rahman back to Iraq to depose al-Hajjaj rather than pressing on into Afghanistan as ordered. Reaching an accord with the Zunbils, promising them tribute exemption should he be victorious, in exchange for safe haven should he be defeated, he began his march west through Persia, defeating al-Hajjaj's loyal commander, Atiyah ibn Amr al-Anbari, in a series of cavalry engagements along the way. At this point, Abd al-Rahman's rebellion was strictly targeting al-Hajjaj, and no threat towards Abd al-Malik or claims for the title of Caliph had been made. But after receiving word of the mutiny, Abd al-Malik opted to back his unpopular governor, sending several thousand experienced Syrian cavalry with all haste to Basra to reinforce him. In a last-ditch effort to turn back the rebels, al-Hajjaj sent 2,000 of these new arrivals to block the mutineers from crossing the Dujail River in the lowlands of Khuzestan. But while they initially saw success against a 300-strong advance force, the rebel army, raised and outfitted for conquest and certainly outnumbering the Syrians, even if the reported strength of 100,000 is a clear exaggeration, soon forded the shallow river, forcing their way across and putting the Syrians to rout. In the aftermath of this clash, the rebels expanded the scope of their movement, now disavowing Abd al-Malik and seeking his overthrow, along with that of al-Hajjaj. It is possible Abd al-Rahman had intended this from the beginning, and simply used the battle as justification. But whether this was the case or not, he now represented a major threat to the overextended caliphate, with so much of Abd al-Malik's core Syrian army away fighting in North Africa. Arriving in Basra in February of 701, after al-Hajjaj had fled north towards Kufa, Abd al-Rahman took advantage of the departed governor's unpopularity to secure oaths of loyalty from much of Basra, fortifying the city and engaging in a month of skirmishing with al-Hajjaj's forces before sallying forth to do battle in mid-March. Initially, the Iraqis held the upper hand. Though the two armies met in the open, al-Hajjaj's loyal forces, drawn from the Qurayshi and Thaqif tribal confederations of the Hejaz, and the Caliph's Syrian reinforcements, were soon forced to retreat to the defensive trenches they had prepared to foil the enemy's cavalry charges. Fierce fighting took place for most of the day, with the spearmen on al-Hajjaj's flanks falling back in disarray, and the centre on the verge of rout. But on the very brink of defeat, an unexpected charge by Sufyan ibn al-Abrad al-Kalbi, leading the forces of Syria's powerful Kalb tribe, one of the few to remain loyal to the Umayyads at the start of the Second Fitna, impacted the Iraqis' right wing, the trench fighting breaking up formations and confusing their defense. With the pressure lessened, the Syrian and Hijazi forces rallied, splitting the Iraqi army in two and setting them to flight. Abd al-Rahman immediately retreating north with the Kufan soldiers and most of his cavalry, while one of his lesser commanders, Ibn Abd al-Muttalib, led the Basran forces in a 3-day fighting retreat before finally escaping al-Hajjaj's pursuit and taking off after his departed general. But despite this defeat and al-Hajjaj's subsequent recapture of Basra, Abd al-Rahman's mutiny was still a major concern for Caliph Abd al-Malik, especially once the people of Kufa rose up to depose al-Hajjaj's loyal overseer, Ibn al-Hadrami, and offer Abd al-Rahman their support upon his arrival. A year later, when al-Hajjaj marched north again after pacifying Basra and receiving further Syrian reinforcements, he found a greatly bolstered rebel army awaiting him outside Kufa. With both forces now
The battle was known as the Battle of the Monastery of Skulls, where the battle took place.
wary of a decisive engagement, they each entrenched themselves on April 4th, 702, with weeks of low-intensity raiding and probing attacks following. This drawn-out exchange favoured the Iraqis, who could easily resupply from Kufa, while al-Hajjaj's army struggled to feed itself in the unfriendly territory. And when word of the ongoing stalemate reached Abd al-Malik, he went as far as offering to remove al-Hajjaj in exchange for peace. Yet, surprisingly, Abd al-Rahman and his companions chose to refuse this offer, his army redoubling the pressure on al-Hajjaj's trenches with daily attacks. This back-and-forth skirmishing between the trenches continued until mid-July, though the morale of the rebels began to flag after the death of their cavalry commander, Jabal ibn Zayd. With no quick victory in sight, some of Abd al-Rahman's commanders began to question the wisdom of refusing the Caliph's peace offering, with some possibly reaching out in secret to the Umayyads in hopes of receiving pardons for their defection. When the two armies finally came together again in pitched battle on July 15th, both armies held firm through the fierce fighting until midday, seemingly evenly matched. But like in the previous battle, it would be a charge by al-Kalbi that decided the outcome. Rushing out with his cavalry from behind the Syrian right wing, he attacked the Iraqi left wing under the command of al-Abrad ibn Qurra, a leader normally noted for his bravery. Here, however, Ibn Qurra fell back in retreat almost immediately, leading to unconfirmed accusations in some accounts that his desertion had been negotiated with the Umayyads before the battle. With the collapse of the left wing, many in the rebel centre began to flee as well, despite Abd al-Rahman's best efforts to rally a defence. After an impassioned call to arms from his pulpit, his commanders and some of the retreating infantry flocked to his side for a last stand. But with the tide of battle now firmly in their favour, the Umayyads simply showered him and his defenders with arrows rather than charge the well-defended trenches. With his position besieged and the battle lost, Abd al-Rahman fled east to the safety of the Zunbils, marking the end of his attempt on the caliphate. Back in the Maghreb, though seemingly unchallenged following her victory at Meskiana, Dia unwittingly planted the seeds of her own downfall by embarking on a scorched earth campaign in the territory she had driven Hassan from. Likely viewing the caliphate's renewed invasion as simply ambitious raiding, she may have hoped to dissuade them from returning by stripping the border regions of plunder, or to demoralize them further after their defeat with a display of brutality. Unfortunately, this move would quickly backfire, for many under Dia's banner, especially those who lived in the affected lands or used them for grazing, were angered by the wasteful and self-destructive action, and without the immediate unifying threat of the caliphate, Dia's Berber kingdom began to fragment. As these events are filtered through the interpretations of non-Berber outsiders, it is even possible the fragmentation had begun earlier, and what Arab observers saw as a scorched earth campaign was in reality an attempt to stamp out brewing tribal rebellion. Thus, despite her massive victory in battle, Dia would never reach Kairouan as her predecessor Caecilius had, with her dominance of the Maghreb reduced to little more than her homeland in the Auris mountain highlands by the time Hassan returned with reinforcements in late 702. Dia mustered what loyal forces remained to her, picking an advantageous battleground to await Hassan's arrival, Tabaka, on the coast north of the modern Tunisian city of Jendouba, where the Auris Mountains and Mediterranean Sea formed a natural choke point. The choice of the battlefield was sound. The terrain would constrain and hamper the numerically superior Muslim army, while the presence of the Byzantine fleet at Sicily prevented Hassan from simply bypassing the choke point by sea. Nevertheless, when the battle was joined early in 703, Dia would see first her army and then her kingdom shatter, with no more Byzantine gold to sway tribes to her banner, and with her actions having alienated most of the lowlanders, many of those who had fought with her at Mesquiana deserted her or chose to join Hassan, now that the Caliphate was the only remaining power bloc in the region. Though she narrowly escaped the disastrous defeat, she was pursued into the Auris Mountains and slain soon after, ending the years of back and forth fighting to conquer the Maghreb. To aid in the rebuilding of the devastated region after Carthage's razing and Dia's scorched earth campaign, thousands of Coptic Christians were resettled from Egypt, taking up residence in newly founded Tunis to work in Hassan's new shipyards for the growing caliphate. In a cruel twist of irony though, Hassan would not get to enjoy the spoils of his great victory any longer than Dia had, as a dispute over jurisdiction with Abdulaziz ibn Marwan, governor of Egypt and brother to the caliph, ended with Hassan losing his hard-earned governorship and returning to Syria in disgrace and poverty scarcely a year later, while Abdulaziz expanded his own power on the back of Hassan's success by installing his loyal servant Musa ibn Nusayr in his place. It was Musa, not Hassan, who would push west to the Atlantic coast in the following few years, converting and assimilating most of the Berber tribes in his path, and waging war against those that refused, finally standing poised for the next great conquest of the ever-growing caliphate, Visigothic Spain. In the east, meanwhile, the unrest sparked by Abd al-Rahman's rebellion would continue for years, with his former companions splitting up and raising later uprisings in Sistan and Khorasan, even after the Zumbils caved to the caliphate's demands and executed him. Iraq and Persia would remain centers of anti-Umayyad discontent, and Afghanistan unconquered for the rest of the Umayyad era, with the same racial and sectarian tensions that had fueled first al-Muqta's and later Abd al-Rahman's rebellions, eventually leading to their downfall. Thanks again to our sponsor, Established Titles. Buy a small plot of land in Scotland and become a lady or a lord, or give this title as an amazing and easy gift. Further 10% off. More videos on the Muslim conquests are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please.
And that'll do it. This has been another interesting video by Kings and Generals. So, by the looks of it, we might be close to seeing. Sorry, what? I just suddenly had a I just had a bit of a brain fart there. Looks like we're coming close to seeing the end of the Umayyads and a new caliphate arising. So there's not much more I can add. So if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.